Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Baseball Buds. It is February 25th. Spring training has started, and we have news and notes pouring in. Today, we are going to be going over my 2024 breakout pitchers. But first, Richie is joining me as always. What's going on, buddy?
Hey Matt, how's it going? Excited spring training is underway. See your boy James Wood hitting some homers, but I think I'm more excited that I found out you're coming to visit Wisconsin this year, which I didn't think was happening. So I think that's the best news I've heard all day. So I'm
Oh,
excited for us to go catch a game together with Baby K and yeah, have a good time.
yeah, we want to get home before the summer months really kick in, and babies due at the end of July. So I kind of thought this would be a good period for us to get away and, really enjoy that last period before, as the baby comes and life changes. And we're not drinkers in general now, especially now that my wife is pregnant, but it'll also be nice to just really come home and spend time with family and friends and have it be more defined as like this chapter in our lives because I feel like, you've experienced this, but it's easy when friends come to home or visit to just make an effort of like, oh, we're going to go to the bar. And it's like, no, we're adults now. Like we have to spend time with each other in adult fashions. And even when we see you, you have the baby. So this will be my first time, officially meeting her in person. So
Is it?
I'm sure she'll
Oh
be
wow, it is.
scarred and
Yeah.
terrified.
Nah, she's FaceTimed you enough to know who you are.
She's going to be like, why is his hair normal? I always see him when he wakes
Yeah,
up.
he's not grumpy.
That's
My
right.
only
Well, I
request
don't know
is we
about
go
that.
to a day game on a Wednesday, Thursday, or a Sunday because I don't think Kenna will be able to stay through a night game. She'll be
Yeah.
sleeping by the
I like
first
I
inning.
like the idea of a day game anyways.
Yeah, then you can
That sounds
get
good to
day
me.
drunk and be passed out.
Yeah, no day drinking. Okay, so let's break into it. We have some great news and notes, and I think the biggest one to start us off is Cody Bellinger finally signing, and it comes at a bit of a rental, in my opinion. It's
Mhm.
a 3-year, $80 million deal, $30 million paid out in 2024, 30 million paid out in 2025, 20 in 2026. But Cody has opt outs in each of the first two seasons, essentially making this a 3-year, 1-year deal, if that makes sense, right? He has the opportunity, if he performs and replicates his 2023 numbers, to opt out after this 2024 season. And I think surely he will. And again, he has had success in Chicago. So, I think we can look forward to him this season. I'm projecting him to have a good season. I don't know that he will have as great of a season as he did last year, but what are your thoughts on the signing, Bellinger's fantasy value now, and then ultimately forecasting, the future? Do you think he opts out after 2024?
I love this deal for both sides. You get the best of both worlds. Bellinger was looking for 10 years, 300 million, I believe, or was it 330? Either way, he was looking for about 30 million a year. This gives him the opportunity to get at least 3 years if he doesn't produce what he was expected to do. So I do like it. I don't think he's going to have as great of a season as he did last year. I think the home runs come down a little bit, but I do think he has the batting average and the plate discipline to be a contributor. And as a center fielder, I think center fielder, or no, they might have Pete Crow Armstrong over there, but either way, he'll be in the outfield. I think it's a great move for both sides.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting piece that you bring up is, Bellinger being a plus defender in center field, Crow Armstrong as well. You bring Bellinger back. I would just have to imagine that he is the opening day center fielder. Armstrong is going to have to hit his way into this lineup, and that is obviously the tool that we are most concerned about with Pete Crow Armstrong. And maybe if Armstrong can hit his way into an opening day roster spot, even an opening day starter spot, it gives the Cubs more fluidity with moving Bellinger to right, moving him to left, having more of that versatile lineup. But I just think the 2024 season is going to see Bellinger in center and Armstrong, in between AAA and the big league roster. And, we will look forward to 2025, full time job for him. But I imagine Bellinger signs or not signs, but plays obviously all the way through 2024 and opts out. I think he hits the open market again, and that will give Armstrong the opportunity to be the Cubs' new center fielder. But we will have to see how spring plays out. All right, moving on. We have another name, not as exciting as Cody Bellinger, but Tim Anderson signs with the Marlins on a 1-year, $5 million deal. I love this. I think Anderson struggled with the shoulder injury, and I've said it before. I think Marcelo Meyer, very similar injuries. We saw the downturn in Marcelo Meyer's prospect pedigree and production last year. I'm expecting Anderson to have a nice 2024, probably 280, maybe get back to 15 home runs. I think it's a great signing for Miami, and I think it's a great signing for Anderson. The only downside is it's not a great lineup. What do you think of Anderson in Miami?
Yeah, I would have preferred him going to the Rays, but the Rays ended up going with Ahmed Rosario, who's our next signing on the news and notes. And I think Tim Anderson waited to sign with the Marlins because he was waiting to see if the Rays would be interested. I don't know if that's what was happening behind the scenes, but hey, I'll take him as a Miami Marlin. I don't think he can hit 15 homers. I think if he hits 5 to 10, you'll be happy. Anything is better than the one home run he hit last year. So I do think the average can come. I don't know. I wouldn't expect a lot of stolen bases out of him just because of his previous injuries and he's getting up there in age. So yeah, I'm interested. I'll take a flyer on him deep, especially for you in dynasty leagues. I know he's your starting shortstop in some leagues, so I know this is a welcomed signing for you in all your dynasty leagues.
Yeah, I know he's starting in one of my leagues for sure, a 30 man. I let him go with a 3-year contract and 18 average value per year and a salary 30 man as well because 18 million was just outrageous. But honestly, I know I'm a little biased because I have no choice to hope for a bounce back in my one league and holding shares of him. But I just have this feeling that his value is so low. If it was just due to the injury and the lack of production was tied to that, you could be getting an immense value here late in drafts, having him on your bench, and injuries happen, sliding him into that shortstop. Obviously, middle infield is great as well if that's a slot within your league, but he doesn't really fit that utility role at all. It is more of a depth draft or trade for, but I'm betting on a bounce back with Anderson. But that brings us, as you said, to our next name. Ahmed Rosario signs 1 year, 2.5 million with the Rays, and I think this is probably why Anderson signed with Miami. It's double the amount of money. And we know the Rays being fiscally responsible. So I like Rosario with the Rays, especially knowing his versatility on the infield, being able to play in the outfield. This is a really great signing for the Rays. What are your thoughts?
I think the biggest news out of this is not part of the headline at all. I think this is bad news for Junior Caminero. We
Yep.
were speculating he might move over to short or Isaac Paredes might play some time there. Unless they move Paredes, I'm starting to feel pessimistic about Junior Caminero and when he's going to come up. But he still could DH. But do the Rays want to do that and hinder him defensively? I don't know. So I have Junior Caminero. I'm banking on him being my starting third baseman in one of our dynasty leagues. So I'm going to have to start doing some soul searching in that league. But Ahmed Rosario, I don't think he's worthy of fantasy unless you're in a deeper league. He's going to provide you some speed, a little bit of average, pretty much no power. So nothing too crazy on that.
Yeah, I think Rosario is a bigger signing for the major league production, the real roster. When we talk fantasy, I think you're right. This is a guy that is going to be kicked up and down waiver wires all season. He's going to be filled for needs and injuries, but he's, in my opinion, not going to be a difference maker. But I think it's a great signing for the major league team. And you're right. I've already started a few weeks ago, started to implement strategies for my junior Caminero shares as regarding to a starter. I think it is in his best interest through development to start the year at AAA. Now it sucks for our fantasy teams. It sucks for our dynasty redrafts that we started this year. Our leagues that were in the first year of inception. But the reality is he's still very young, and more time seasoned in the minor leagues is going to only benefit him. And I think with the Rays' current circumstance with shortstop and the drama that follows their former superstar shortstop, they really are trying to find pieces that stick at each position, and bringing Caminero into that ever-changing lineup, I think, only makes things more difficult. So Rosario will really help their ability on a daily basis to manage their lineup and to set out the best lineup possible. And I think it's great. We'll see how the lineup looks in July. I think that's what I'm most curious for. But speaking about July lineup movement, position movement, our next name is Sal Frelick. News out of spring training is that he is playing a little bit of third. He's playing a little bit of second. You have on here that he is playing third base. What are your thoughts on the movement of Sal Frelick, a plus plus outfield defender, making his way to the infield for Milwaukee?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting depending on who they're going to stick out in the outfield besides Jackson Churio and Garrett Mitchell. They was supposed to be Self Relic, so I'm not sure who it's going to be. Maybe they put Yelich back out there, but this screams to me that maybe we are trying to move Willie Adames. Joey Ortiz, we thought was going to be playing third, but it sounds like he's going to be playing short. Bryce Terang is a great defender at second. So I don't know what's going on there. You mentioned in previous podcasts that Joey Ortiz is one of the best defenders for shortstops. So maybe a trade's coming down the pipe with Willie Damas. Maybe there's rumors that we're not aware of. If the Brewers trade Willie Damas in the next week or two, then we'll have our clear cut answer. But I don't think the Brewers are going out and signing Matt Chapman anytime soon, like I was hoping. So that's pretty much all I got on that.
Yeah, and I think the Sal Frelick to third base is something within camp that they're just trying to see if they can have some roster fluidity, as we talked about with Ahmed Rosario. Frelick being a plus defender, I think his limitations are on the offensive side of the ball. And third base obviously is not the type of position you want to slot a guy in that's going to hit 270, 280 with lucky to say the least 7 to 8 home runs. But I think what this will allow is more versatility. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is the names coming down the pipe for Milwaukee. Tyler Black having a very similar profile to Frelick, being a better defend or a better offensive player though to Frelick's defense, and it's really cutting him out of an opportunity with Milwaukee. Black being a guy that can hit you 15 to 20 home runs as he's shown in the minors, can steal bases even though he doesn't have plus run times. This takes away a lot of that opportunity. So I'm curious what's happening with Milwaukee. I think as you said there are moves to be made that we may not be aware of yet. Obviously, we've been talking about the Adamas trade possibility for a number of weeks now. It has to happen for us to start to really see how this lineup's going to shake down. And I'm also curious with this move to third base if Joey Wiemer's new swing is something that the Brewers feel like is
Joey
going to
Weimer,
have immense impact.
that's who I
I
was
think,
thinking about.
yeah,
Yep.
I think if you're really thinking about playing Frelick in the infield, you have to believe that Joey Wiemer is a starting major league outfielder, and he has shown great seasons in the minor league, and he just didn't translate last year. Again, he's young. I think from a dynasty perspective, Joey Wiemer's shares should be skyrocketing in value. I've been trying to acquire him in all leagues because I've known about the swing change, and I believe that there is more consistency to be had with him cutting down that big leg kick and that big hitch. So we will continue to follow Milwaukee, obviously, as our hometown team and the news that comes out. But that's what we have right now with the South Relic news. Moving on to another free agent that's still available. Blake Snell, as we have mentioned in past weeks, has an offer from the Yankees. Still no contract, still no signing. Anything that you want to add here, Richie, that we haven't touched on?
No, there's no news on exactly what the deal is or for how much or for how long. So just threw it in the notes as a speculative, noteworthy item to talk about. I would hate for Blake Snell to go to the New York Yankees just being in that ballpark, that atmosphere, that crowd. I would prefer him to be a San Francisco Giant or Seattle Mariner. He's from the Pacific Northwest, so it makes sense that he would want to go back there. It's just, are they willing to pay what the Yankees are paying? So I don't know what's happening behind closed doors, but I would hate for him to be a Yankee. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, and it's interesting to see the average fan. Matt and I spoke on this on our Pitcher Bet podcast, and Matt's take was the Yankees have to sign him, and you and I know the numbers a little bit better. We also know how where players play is a huge factor, right? Yankee Stadium or the San Francisco Giants organization, very different ballparks, very different fans, and very different fits. Snell plays so much better in San Francisco with his numbers, his stat line, and then you look at Yankee Stadium. My fear is that you'd have Carlos Rodon 2.0, a guy that has had success, a guy that you bring in to be a big piece of the organization and just absolutely gets shelled because he's a fly ball pitcher. Now, our biggest knock on Snell is that walk rate. With a short porch in right field, those walks turn into runs. And I think we'd be looking at Snell's ERA 3.54 if he pitched in Yankee Stadium. So I would hate for him to sign with the Yankees, but I do feel like after they missed out on Yamamoto, they're just thinking to themselves, "We've got to make another move." I think that move was made. I think it was Stroman. I think you wait till 2025 offseason and make another move, but we'll see. I know that Cashman also feels the pressure, but this is the type of signing that can lose you your job. You have Rodon and Snell, and they both underperform. That's fireable,
Hmm.
and I hope he's putting that into the equation.
Yeah, we'll see.
Next news, injury, and here it is. Highly touted pitching prospects that continue to get hurt. Ricky Tiedemann is dealing with hamstring and calf tightness. Major concern for a player that we had hopes and expectations to possibly break camp in the major league rotation, or at least to have a major league role. What are you hearing on Tiedemann?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like anything too crazy, but it will delay him a little bit. Obviously, he won't be pitching for a little bit. I don't know the specifics on how long he'll be out. It just doesn't feel good knowing he has an injury track record. We talked about it with Noah Schultz last week, and another pitching prospect I'm blanking on, but it's just starting to get me worried that he's going to be able to handle a starter's workload until he can prove otherwise. And I'm starting to worry he's going to end up being a closer. We'll see.
Yeah, minor inflammation is what I'm seeing. We'll see. It's something we'll
He's
have to
got
track,
great
but
stuff, but yeah, if he can't stay
yeah, and
healthy,
I mean, at this point with where I feel, and I hold shares of him. He's a better, more polished version of DL Hall,
you know,
and yeah,
the vibe I'm getting from him, Nate Pearson. That's the vibe I get from Ricky Tiedemann.
uh, I'm not gonna go that
I'm
far,
I'm not
just
sa- I'm
because.
just I'm not just saying that's what pops in my head when I think Ricky Tiedemann.
Yeah, I mean, Pearson from the very onset for me with his velocity, the workhorse mentality. It always was more like late stage Noah Syndergaard. I just always felt like he was
Mm,
just destined to blow it out. I think Tiedemann still has the opportunity to be a very productive major leaguer. I just don't know in what facet. That's why I say DL Hall,
yeah,
right?
that's fair.
They both have plus pitches, and they've both had injury concerns. It's just that Hall is a few years down the road with development than Tiedemann is, and we've just been stuck in this year and a half now where there's constant injuries. But I've not been acquiring Tiedemann. I've been holding with my shares just because I spent value to acquire him when his stock was higher. So I can't sell him. It's a hard case right now. Next news and notes. We have Atlanta Braves news. In competition for the fifth spot in the rotation is AJ Smith-Shawver, Bryce Elder, and Ronaldo Lopez. Lopez is favored to win the job right now. You have on here, and I hope that is the case because I have invested heavily, and it's interesting because it really will allow AJ Smith-Shawver to, I think, develop more in the minor leagues if they go that route, or if they stretch him out to a long reliever. I think there's also a lot of value there in the RP role, especially with ratios and categories, and roto as well as points, because you can be a guy that could sneakily be a top 10 relief pitcher in points just because of those longer appearances. Bryce Elder is still my least favorite of those three names. What are your thoughts?
I as long as it's not Bryce Elder, he was the
Yep.
fifth pitcher for the Braves last year, and he outproduced what I think anybody thought he was going to do. So I would hate to see Bryce Elder. I am intrigued with Reynaldo Lopez. He's been a reliever for quite some time. The last time he had a starter's workload was in 2019, and he pitched 184 innings with a 5.38 ERA. So it wasn't good. He did have a decent amount of strikeouts, I believe. I can't find it right now. Computer is loading, but I'm interested to see if he gets back to form. Atlanta is known for producing good pitchers, so maybe they find something in him that they can tweak. As an AJ Smith Shawver owner now, I am begrudgingly want him to win the job. I don't think he will, just because he has some grooming to do in AAA once he went back down. Had a little bit of struggle. I think he needs to work on his command confidence a little bit. So if Lopez wins, I'll be okay with it, but I would love for him to lose it mid season for AJ Smith Shawver as soon as he hopefully shows out in AAA.
Yeah, Lopez he's not put together numbers that would get you excited. I think it is more the prospect's pedigree, that is still holding over. He has performed really, really well out of the bullpen. And again, that's something to like a lot. When you look back on that 2019 season, he had a 5.38 ERA over 33 games started. So the health was there. His FIP was a 5.04. I think that's a bad indicator as well. It was age 25 season, 184 innings. He ended up with 169 strikeouts. That's an 8.3 strikeout per nine. And again, this was a guy coming over from the Nationals with Lucas Giolito that was supposed to have a really good, successful career. We've seen that come more in his opportunities out of the bullpen. Just look back in the 2023 season with Chicago, 43 games pitched, none started at a 4.29 ERA. So that's not a lot to get you excited about. But overall, he had 52 strikeouts and 42 innings. So the K ability was there. Moving over to the LA Angels, had a much better performance, 13 games, a 2.77 ERA, 13 innings, 19 strikeouts. And then going on to Cleveland, 12 games, 11 innings, 12 strikeouts with a 0 earned run average and a 2.16 FIP. I love the fact that he's coming out of the Cleveland organization. I think there's a lot of opportunity and maybe changes that they could have made very slightly in that short term that could really reinvigorate him as a starter. I think we'll know after camp, though. This spring will be a great test. If he comes out and gets shelled, I think the reality is he is a reliever, and those shares that you have, you just have to hope for holds. You have to hold for opportunity in that relief role.
You know what's going to happen is because we want Smith Shawver and Lopez, Bryce Elder's going to win it. So
Get the job. Yep.
yeah, so let's bank on that.
All right. Last news and note I have for us for the day is the Brewers brought back Brandon Woodruff on a 2-year deal. He is
Let's
likely out
go.
all of the 2024 season. I love this for Woodruff. I love it for the Brewers. They traded Corbin Burns. He's going to be out. We don't have the pitching face of the franchise with him and Burns presumably being gone just a month ago. Bringing him back to the fold, I think, really allows him time to rehab this injury, make a good 2025 debut, really cement himself then with the consistency of being healthy again and hopefully signing a long-term deal with Milwaukee in the 4 or 5 year contract range where he could be the Brewers' ace or number one frontline starter as Milwaukee enters into this next phase of young offensive development, hitting the major leagues. What are your thoughts on Woodruff coming back?
I would prefer him come back healthy 2025 and we trade him at the deadline.
Hmm.
That's what I would prefer. I don't, with
Okay.
his injury history, I don't want the Brewers to sign him long term. I like a lot of the pitching arms we have down on the farm. So I think we can rebuild our staff and don't throw your money away on somebody who's injury prone and has a history, especially a pitcher. So I would prefer them not to sign him long term and just for him to produce enough value. And hey, maybe we're still playoff contenders in 2025 and he can contribute to that. But if not, ship him off.
All righty. So we are moving on. As everyone knows, it is breakout sleeper season. We are going to join the fold with that just because this is a great time for us to really talk about the guys that we enjoy and the guys that we may not be looking for to have so much success this season. That will be in just a few weeks here. But first, we want to define exactly what our terms for breakouts and sleepers are. Today, we're talking about breakouts. So I will highlight that first, and then I will touch on sleeper, which again, we will highlight in a few weeks. Our breakout definition is players who have their absolute best season to date. Now, we would like to define that a little bit more as this season goes on. We would like to put some age requirements and age floors on that. But right now, breakouts are players who will have their best season yet to date. So that is how we are going to go about our lists this week and next week. Sleepers are defined as players who will outperform their average draft position and provide value. That one's a little bit easier. That one's a wide range of ages. I think generally when we're speaking on both of these, and correct me if I'm wrong, Richie, usually sleepers are going to be players that have been established or at least have a couple of years of major league experience where they're underperformed or they've lost prospect pedigree, and we think they can provide you that value. Breakouts, I think, are usually guys that we're looking at the earlier half of their career and are going to take that next step into having more solidified names. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like everything you said there. We've talked off air on how to calculate these definitions, and I agree. Sleepers more so when you think about it, it's like buying the dip. We talk about Aaron Nola, his odd versus even years. One year it's going to be a 3 ERA versus the other is going to be a 4.5 ERA. So you buy him on the 4.5 ERA and sell him on the 3 ERA. So one year Aaron Nola is a bust for us, and the other year he's a sleeper. So this year, I think he's right in the middle of a sleeper. Well, he should have been a sleeper because last year he had a high ERA, but people are starting to catch on. So he's getting drafted as if he's going to be having a 3 ERA, which if history repeats itself, he will. So
Yeah. Well, and that leads right into our bust classification, which I think when you talk about a player and attaching the word bust to them, it is in a lot of ways disrespectful. But I want to define it so that it takes away that disrespect because I don't think it is meant to be a disrespectful concept. The word bust has just, attached association with that concept. Busts are players that will not provide value for their current average draft position or have significant injury concerns. I added that injury portion because I think it is really, really important. I think we both discount players that have the injury tag or concern, and I'm okay labeling those players as busts. And then the big piece of that being players that will not provide the value at their current average draft position. So it's just in reality looking at players that we think are overvalued by the drafting marketplace, not necessarily players that we really dislike. Would you agree with that?
yeah, I think for you and I, the biggest piece is the injury for labeling somebody a bust. I'm taking a hard stance this year on not taking those injury prone players. I've been burned one too many times with Chris Bryant, Eloy Jimenez, Anthony Rendon. The list goes on and on. It never fails. Never fails. Byron Buxton. I could keep going and going and going, but I will be staying away from those guys as much as I can in all drafts.
Yeah, same. I agree with that sentiment. Okay, let's break into it. We have done this in a tier nature just to make it a little bit easier. We're going to be giving more of a broad overlay on a lot of these players. We do not have a lot of defined data to back up exactly what we're saying just because our list is so deep. We will probably touch on a few of these names in a deeper way as the season gets closer or even into the season as we start to talk about how some of these players are living up to our expectations or are not living up to our expectations. But the first tier is one individual player. That is George Kirby. Comes in at 18 on Scott White's CBS rankings. I want to preface that we are using Scott White's head to head CBS rankings. So Kirby is his 18th ranked player. Richie, you love him a lot. You've got me to love him a lot. We're both owners of him. I am expecting Kirby to enter into SP10 territory this season and really make a push for top five. What are your thoughts on Kirby and your expectations?
You know, I love me some George Kirby. Loved him since his time in the minors. Loved his control. Loved his command. Loved his stuff. The biggest thing that's going to take Kirby and the biggest knock he gets is his strikeout rate, which was only at like 8%, um, or 8K per nine, I should say. 8.12K per nine last year, which actually was a dip from his 2022 season where it was a 9.21. But at the end of the year, he developed a splitter, which is the new pitch that everybody wants to get this year. And he didn't throw it that often, but I'm curious if he can fine tune it and really have it a secondary, like, put away pitch for him. He only threw it 6% of the time, only 169 splitters he threw last year. He primarily throws a four seam. Let's hear a sinker as well. Slider and a curve is his main pitch breakdown. So I agree with you, George Kirby. He's got the command, he's got the pitches. Now he's throwing another put away pitch with a splitter. I love to see everything for George Kirby. I'm trying to see what it got as far as a stuff plus goes. George Kirby, his splitter, it's listed as a um 106 on Fangraphs. So that's right above average. 100's average, 110's above average, just for listeners who are not aware. So it should be an above average pitch for him to use.
Yeah, when we think about Kirby's profile, it really does take a hit with the lack of strikeouts. But when you're drafting Kirby, you're drafting him because of his stability and his floor. looking at his overall, ability level, it is the point 0.9 walks per nine. It's the ultimate control that Kirby has. And I think with a pitcher like that, you're okay taking a hit on strikeouts if you can really watch his development and watch that ERA continue to drop. His 2023 season had a FIP of a 3.34. His ERA was 3.35. So right in line with where his FIP was. And I think throughout his career, we're going to often see that because of his ability to control. Also playing in the right ballpark. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit better run production this year around him. That lineup obviously is still developing as a lot of the young minor leaguers that we get excited about continue their development path towards the major leagues. But I do think just from a volume perspective, we could see Kirby climb into that top 10. And I think if he's able to elevate that strikeout per nine rate into the nines, we're going to see him really make a push for top five, at least in points leagues. And again, injury risk is always concerned, but I think Kirby, at least from the profile that we have, is a guy that we can trust to stay healthy and really continue to develop into one of the best floor pitchers in Major League Baseball. That for me is enough to get really excited about.
Yeah, you know I'm already excited about George Kirby, and having him at value in our dynasty league just makes it that much more glorious for me.
What a sweet little cherry on top. Um, all right, next we have a tiered list. This is going to be we're calling it Young Guns, and I guess you could really call it flamethrowers too, based off a couple of the guys we have on here. So coming in as at number 28 for Scott White's rankings is Bobby Miller, 29 right after Grayson Rodriguez, and at 30 Tanner Bybee. Clearly, he had thought to himself these three players were all similar, and I think they're all three very different. Those are conversations we can get into in a little bit here. But 40, we have Gavin Williams, and 45, we have Hunter Greene. You have noted that Greene has added a curveball and a splitter this spring. Why don't you talk a little bit about Hunter Greene, but then follow that up with who would you rather have over the next 5 seasons? Pick two of these guys for me.
Yeah, Hunter Greene, primarily known to be a fastball slider guy for the Cincinnati Reds. Seeing that he added a curveball and a splitter in the offseason is very encouraging, knowing that he has a third and fourth pitch now that he can rely on. But it's yet to be seen. Can he control that in spring training games? Can he locate it? Does he leave it middle? Those are all unknowns. But when you hear things like that in the offseason, those are impactful news items that you should actually be paying attention to, because that can give you a leg up on the competition if they're not aware of that news. I love that for Hunter Greene. I am buying. I'm gonna try to acquire him before his stock rises in drafts. So I definitely like Hunter Greene. Um, I know this is technically your breakouts list, but you took all of them. So out of this list, I would agree with Bobby Miller, Grayson Rodriguez, and Hunter Greene as being breakouts. Tanner Bybee is more of a control artist rather than a pure stuff. Gavin Williams struggled a little bit with his control and command. I do believe in him, but he's mostly a fastball for right now. So I like them as sleepers and at cost and where they're going, but I don't know if this is going to be their breakout season, if that makes sense. I give it another year or two for both of them. If But going back to your question, if I could only pick two from this, I think I have to go with Bobby Miller and Grayson Rodriguez. The prospect pedigree, the stuff that they have, the control is there. Bobby Miller is the industry darling. He pops on all of the stuff plus metrics that everybody's raving about. Bobby Miller has 130 fastball, 153 slider. So like when we're talking about stuff plus, like 100's average, 110 is above, 120, 130, you're getting elite. So when you get to like 150, you're talking about like almost the best in the game. So he's got one of the best sliders. His sinker 108, cutter or curveball, I should say, 115, and a changeup 105. He's got five average or above average pitches, with two of them being elite with his fastball and slider. The strikeouts will come from him, no doubt about it. He just needs to adjust to MLBs and how to attack and come up with a game plan. So hopefully Will Smith can do a little bit pitch calling for him so he can truly exceed. So yeah, to answer your question, picking two out of the five, going Bobby Miller and Grayson Rodriguez.
I love that. Now, if you could pick one for the 2024 season to provide you draft value based off selection, which all these guys are kind of going in the same round, right? Roster construction is really important, but I want you to pick one for the 2024 season to really change the way that your rotation setup looks.
I'm going Bobby Miller. I think Bobby
Okay.
Miller becomes a top 10, top 15 player this year, or top pitcher, I should say. So, Bobby Miller, hands down. Hunter Green is going to be a value with where he's going at. Bobby Miller at 28, Hunter Green at 45, but I still want Bobby Miller. He's going to be in my categories league that I have that you're going to help me draft, even though you work. He's going to be a target as my number 2 or 3 starting pitcher. I'm going to try to get him.
I love that. Now, I agree with everything you said. I think the one name on this list that could elevate themselves to, I'd say, best in the game status for me is Hunter Green, but he has to get that third pitch, and that pitch has to be plus. It can't just be a throwaway pitch. It can't be just something to change the eye level of the batter. It has to be the splitter for me as well. If he can put together a plus splitter, maybe a 120 splitter, which I know is kind of crazy, I think he can do it. You're talking about a guy that I think could elevate himself to top five in the game. Now, there's another piece to this. His durability and his outings have to extend as well. So, while all of these guys are talented players, I think Greene has an opportunity this year to make that jump. Miller also, but Greene again is a little bit longer in his development track. Miller already has the pitches. That's the only thing working against Greene is Greene's got to develop them. But number two overall in the draft pick. This is a guy that has the pedigree. We just really need to see it all play out for him. And I am hoping for a Hunter Green breakout in a lot of ways. But I would agree with you. If I'm choosing two, it's Miller and Rodriguez. Moving on, we have our next tier. These are some names that we've been excited about through the years, but I think they have all kind of fallen into the same bag. Coming in at 51 is Hunter Brown, 53 Andrew Abbott, and 54 Kyle Harrison. So, steering away from dynasty here, Richie, I want you to pick one of these three names for the 2024 season.
One name for the 2024 season. I think I got to go Kyle Harrison. I believe in his stuff more than the other two. Hunter Brown, he had a great start. I thought he was going to be an ace, and as soon as I traded him to you, he fell off. So I'm sorry for that. Andrew Abbott, you and I truly never really believed in him. It almost seemed like a mirage, and he was just outperforming what the underlying numbers were saying. Kyle Harrison, known to have a big fastball, known to have control issues, but once he came up to the majors, he got that under control and looked to be legit. So hopefully that sticks and continues into the season. So I think the highest ceiling is Kyle Harrison, and out of this group, he's the one I'd be targeting.
Love that. Love that. Okay. Next, we have a little interactive moment. So, you were kind enough to go on our Twitter right before we started recording tonight and asked general question what people would like to hear. And we got a comment back talking about or asking about us having a conversation regarding Brian Wu and Bryce Miller, both of the Seattle Mariners. So we're going to break these guys down a little bit deeper than we have other players. I'm going to allow you to do that since you've pulled up all these wonderful numbers. But go ahead and kick us off and kind of direct this little segment the way you'd like.
Yeah, so first, Brian Wu is listed as 59 on Scott White's rankings. Bryce Miller listed as 65. So I don't know if that's where they're going on average draft position based on which platform you're playing on. If we're looking at these two in a vacuum, I'm taking Bryce Miller over Brian Wu. Bryce Miller, a lot of offseason stuff has been going on for him. He's developed a new splitter. I don't have the calculations here, but somebody listed that it would be like top five in horizontal movement and vertical break, which would put it, as far as stuff plus goes, near the top as an elite splitter. So that is something to note, and I'm curious to see if that plays as soon as we can get that StatCast data in spring training or in the beginning of the season. Bryce Miller, mostly known for having that big fastball and that big sweeper that has like the best vertical or horizontal break. But the issue was people were laying off the sweeper because of the arm slot, the biggest difference behind JP Sears, I believe. So Bryce Miller's also been aligning his arm slot. So I love to see that he's going to have three above average pitchers with his fastball, splitter, and a sweeper. And the overall numbers last year for Bryce Miller weren't the greatest, ended with a 4.32 ERA over 131 innings. But I wanted to look from June 12th to September 16th is pretty much until the end of the year, except for you take out the last two games, which happen to be against Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros. Because if you're in a daily format, you're not starting him against those two teams that were pushing for the playoffs. Bryce Miller went 84 and two thirds innings, 80 strikeouts, 19 walks, and had a 3.61 ERA. I'm expecting him to improve even better than that, and I think he could be top 25, top 30 easily if he can command that splitter. Now we look at Brian Wu. I think he's also going to break out. Love what he did last year. If you take out his first game and his last two games, all of which were against the Texas Rangers, I don't know if you remember this, Matt, but Brian Wu surprisingly got called up to pitch against the Rangers. He looked shell shocked, got blown up. We take out those three starts. He went 78 and two thirds innings, 78 strikeouts, only 25 walks, a 3.32 ERA, and a 3.94 FIP to back it up. Stuff Plus has great measures or great numbers. Fastball sits at 101, cutter at 103, a sinker 109. He's got a curveball that's above average at 126 as far as Stuff Plus goes, and a changeup that could use some developing at 84, so a little below average. Um, so he's got a little bit less stuff compared to Bryce Miller. You look at the fastball 101 compared to Bryce Miller, it's 121. I like him to break out, but if I had to take one or the other, I'm going Bryce Miller. I know that was a handful to throw at you, Matt, but what are your thoughts
No,
on
and
these two?
everything you said and you broke down is exactly why I agree with you and why I feel like Miller is over Woo. And in context here, if you've listened to us for a while, that there is a certain part of scouting that I still believe to be true when it comes to the eye test, and it actually just comes to that intuition and that feeling. And for me, that is pushing me absolutely in the direction of Miller. Your statistics back that up. When I really look at who I would rather have, and then I look at the performance that I saw in the field last year, it's Bryce Miller because of the fastball. That 121 stuff plus great on the fastball gives him the opportunity to develop off speed pitches, to make mechanical changes like the arm slot, and really be the best pitcher of the two. And when you look at Brian Wu, that fastball stuff plus of 101 sitting almost directly at average, he is always going to have to be sharper and more dominant with his command than Bryce Miller is because he just doesn't have that put away velocity. I think it's nice that he has a 126 curveball with stuff plus, but if you don't have the fastball, you've really got to set up the pitch count perfectly to be able to deliver that curveball. And if I'm hitters, I am sitting on his fastball. I am waiting for that one pitch in my at bat where I get it and I'm going to swing at it. So, from that perspective, I think Bryce Miller has the ability to be a top 30 pitcher year over year, where Brian Wu, I think, has the opportunity to develop into more of a Tanner Bybee, more of a floor pitcher that has a lot of value in fantasy, has a lot of value in dynasty because you can continue to sit on this guy and know that he's going to give you good ratios. But in regards to giving you high outcome production, I just see it lining more with Miller. And Miller is, in my opinion, more enjoyable to watch.
I have a new philosophy I'm going with as far as pitchers go. We have all this statistics that we can relate to, all these advanced metrics with shape and movement. I'm going to be focusing on pitchers that have a great fastball and can develop secondary pitches because you're hearing about all these pitchers tinkering, tweeting, going to tread athletics or driveline baseball, working on adding velocity, getting the most out of everything they can. But if you don't have a great fastball from the jump, you're not going to go well. I mean, the fastball is the most thrown pitch that you're going to have in your arsenal. Like most pitchers are throwing that 40 to 60% of the time. So I think I'm going to be starting to do that. Bryce Miller is going to be the first test subject for me. um, the only one that I can think of that defied that was Kyle Bradish last year. Doesn't have a great fastball, but had, I think, the best slider by Stuff Plus, and he just started to throw that more. I think he threw his slider as much of his fastball. So, um, just a little side note on that.
Well, and I think, you bringing that up is really important because let's just take a quick look at the number one SPs. We'll use Scott White's as our example here and kind of calculate based off the fastball. Strider coming in at number one, obviously plus fastball. Cole, two, plus fastball. Corbin Burns. Whether you want to classify it as the cutter or the fastball, he's plus. Gosman, honestly, don't know enough data on Gosman. I know his secondary stuff is pretty
He's known for
electric.
his splitter. He's got the best splitter in
Yep.
the game.
Yep. So he's got a plus splitter, right? Zach Wheeler, plus fastball. Luis Castillo, plus fastball. Zach Gallen, crafty, right? So, he's another outlier. Yamamoto, crafty. Obviously, we have no major league data on him. Pablo Lopez, I think plus fastball, right?
Yeah, Pablo Lopez
Mm.
has a few above average. I'm trying to sort by. Okay, so well, I don't want to spoil my one of my
No, go
breakouts.
for it.
Um, so Spencer Strider, according to Fangraphs, has the best fastball by Stuff Plus at 141. Can you guess who number two is? Number three is Bobby Miller at 130, which is a reason why he's a breakout for me. Number four, Tyler Glass now at 128. Number five, Hunter Greene at 127. Number two and number six are on my breakout list.
All
Can you
right.
guess
So I
who
would
they are?
guess number 2 is Yuri Perez.
No. Same
Okay.
team though. No, no, not the same team.
All right, I'm gonna give it one more guess because I'm scrolling on the rankings here and it's taking me all the way down. Tell me because I can't come up with a name.
Number two is Taj Bradley.
Ah, very
He
nice.
comes in with
Okay.
131, and number six is Nick Pivetta at 125. Well, Nick Pivetta is technically a tie with Garrett Cole and Dylan Cease for best fastball.
Okay. Well, and those numbers are important because I think they
Bryce
play right
Miller,
into what you said.
Bryce Miller comes in at number 10 with a 121, which we just
Okay.
talked about.
Is there anyone within the top 20 that you would classify as just an outright bad pitcher?
Um, well, it kind of falls off. So like once you get to 20, like the number 20 fastball is 111. So like it's hard to justify because I said 100 is average.
It's just above average,
One
yeah.
111, like 110, we're talking about above average. So like number 20 is Cutter Crawford, 19 Mackenzie Gore, 18 Luis Medina, but like they don't, like, for Mackenzie Gore and Luis Medina, they have trash command. Like they don't know where their pitches are going. Carter Crawford is somebody who you like a lot and is on your breakout list. So he has good command. He just hasn't had the shot yet. So Michael Kopech
Well,
has a great fastball, but doesn't
yep.
know where it's going. Um, yeah,
It's an interesting tier because you're right. All four of those you could talk yourself into drafting because you could see them figuring it out or having moments where they have, dominated. I think of Gore's performance against the Royals last year, which was a fantastic outing, but it was against the Royals. Kopech has had flashes, right? Medina has not yet had that breakout moment, but there is opportunity there. And it's interesting to see what part of this list and this tier is really the guys that have it and will never figure it out. Well, we will have to track that over years.
I do have a filter for at least 100 innings pitched last year just to get rid of all the relievers so we could focus on starting
Yeah.
pitchers.
Okay.
Um, Let me see if I can toy around with this and see if I can. Stupid ads.
Well, let's
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 move
save it.
on.
Let's save it for next week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Next tier, we get into some of the names that are less exciting, but I still think provide value. Next on the list is Reese Olson for the Detroit Tigers, and coming in at 66, Reed Detmers. Olson was 64. Reed Detmers is a guy you've liked for a number of years. You've been burned for a number of years, but kind of into that conversation, we have seen the flashes, including a no hitter from Detmers. So, out of these two players, if you're looking to roster one for the next 3 seasons in Dynasty, who are you taking?
Next 3 seasons, I'm going Reed
Three
Detmers.
seasons.
Reed Detmers.
Okay.
Give me Reed Detmers.
Why?
Um, because as soon as I give up on him is when he's going to break out.
Give me some data.
No, I like Reed Detmers a lot. People forget this time last year, Reed Detmers was slotted to be. I think he was like the top five breakout on similar planes as a Bobby Miller, Grayson Rodriguez is this year, and it was because he was developing that hard slider that added, like, I want to say 5 to 7 miles per hour. The issue with Reed Detmers is he doesn't know how fast it's going to come out. He doesn't know if it's going to come out at 88, 90. So depending on how fast it's coming out, it's going to mess with his control. And we saw that with the numbers. His overall I don't know if I have yeah, his overall numbers went 148 and two thirds innings with a 4.48 ERA with a 1.35 whip. So that's bad. 60 walks to 168 strikeouts. So the strikeouts were there with that pitch. But what I liked was at the end of the year, his last seven starts from August 16th on, 41 and 41 innings pitched, 37 strikeouts, 16 walks, so still kind of high, but a 2.41 ERA. And if we shrink that down to even the last four starts, pretty much all of September, he went 24 and two thirds innings, 26 strikeouts, seven walks, so still kind of high, but a 1.82 ERA. So I think he started to figure something out at the end of the year. Chalk that up to the Angels were out, Otani was leaving, maybe there was less pressure on him. I think that also plays a role into this year. You know, Reed Detmers, not only is he going to get more starts because he's not in a six-man rotation, but there's less pressure on the Angels to do everything they can with Otani's last year. So I think there's a little less pressure on him. If we look at his grades, that slider that he was developing came in at a 124 stuff plus, and his other pitches are not the greatest. So fastball 87, curve at a 93, and a change at 92. So his curve and change are average or just below average. His fastball is not the greatest. So this is kind of contradicting what I just said of I want to target players with great fastballs, but you know, maybe Reed Detmers can be the exception like Kyle Bradish with having a great slider. And I'm going to give Reed Detmers one more year. Um, yeah, I can't quit Reed Detmers.
Well, it's interesting. You bring up the end of season numbers, and that's why I wanted to pair these two together. You look at Reese Olson, his September, October, five total games started, 31 and one third innings pitched with a ERA of 1.44, 25 strikeouts in those 31 and a third innings. Both had phenomenal finishes to their season. And I think that has kind of added to the hype that we're seeing for both of these players as we get into, spring training now. The difference, I think, is Olson and his ultimate availability in that um, very crowded rotation for Detroit, as opposed to Detmers has been solidified as having a role in Anaheim. I'm curious by both of these players. I think what's ultimately going to happen is Olson's probably going to fall in line more with the Brian Wu, Tanner Bybee, higher floor, give you consistency. Where Detmer's being more volatile, having those massive performances followed by those massive blowups. It's really a question of what do you want to buy into at the end of your draft. I think personally, Reese Olson's a guy that I would have queued up just because I'm looking for more of that floor depth as opposed to Detmers, where if I've got a pretty safe rotation, I might be more inclined to draft Detmers, hoping that I can finally get a guy that puts it together. I think the final note for me with Reed Detmers is just the age. We've talked about this a lot. Lefties take a little bit longer, in our opinion, to develop. Detmers, as it stands right now, is still only 24 years old. Will turn 25 in July. This is a guy to continue to monitor because we both do expect the breakout to happen eventually, that consistency to come. And I think the ceiling is much, much higher with Detmers than Olson.
Yeah. Did you know that Reese Olson was drafted by the Milwaukee Brewers in 2018 in the 13th round?
18th round. No.
I
Is it
did not know
13th?
that. Baseball
Oh,
Reference has it as the 13th round. So yeah, now I got to switch to Reese Olson because he is a former Brewer. Now they are very close. I will say that I'm gonna stick with Reed Detmers though, just for he was a first. I think he was a first round draft pick. I don't have that up,
yep.
but
Out of Louisville.
he comes with the pedigree too. He was rushed to the majors. I think like the the next year after he was drafted, he came to the majors, which is one of the reasons why I liked him. But now I'm realizing the Angels just do that with all their first round draft picks, so it's not really um like you were all that great. They did it with Zach Neto, they did it with Nolan Chanel. So like I don't know, they're just picking players who are as close to MLB ready as they can. So I don't know, take that with a
Well, and I
grain of
think a lot
salt.
of that strategy was we need to give Otani help. We need to
Well,
give Otani help.
they should have signed free agents and built
Yeah.
their farm system. But
Well,
hey,
you know,
they don't
it
got
is
the
what it is.
juice.
It will be interesting to see if they very nice. It will be interesting to see if they change their approach now that Otani's gone. Really start to go with more of a balanced approach within high school and college arms, high school and college bats, and really start to develop these players now that they know that their window has completely changed and they're in more of a rebuilding stage. as much as they want to continue to lie to themselves with the large contracts of Rendon and Trout still on the team. But next here, we have two more for you before we wrap the show. And this next one's a little fun. We have Brandon Pfaadt coming in at number 70, big playoff production, terrible regular season production. And then at 82, we have Taj Bradley. You talked about him having the number 2 overall fastball for stuff plus at 131. And then wrapping it up in this tier is Brian Bello. Very, very different profile to the Pfaadt and Bradley pairing there. So I think the question, Richie, really comes down to, again, we'll push this out. 5 years within Dynasty, you're rostering one of these players over a 5-year window. I think I know your answer, but who are you choosing between Fott, Bradley, and Bello?
You know I'm taking Taj Bradley all day.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Yeah. He's got the location. He's got the one of the greatest fastballs. I think he didn't have the greatest season because of that mental aspect. He got called up early in the season, had great outings, and then gets sent back down, I think, to work on a cutter because the Rays didn't believe that his curveball could sustain the whiff rates that it was. You look at the stuff plus, it's 88 for his curve. It comes in at a 45 grade by MLB Pipeline. So, I mean, everybody in the industry knew that that curve couldn't sustain, and everybody was trying to sit on the fastball, and they were getting blown away with the curveball just dropping out below. So the cutter comes in as above average at 106, and he's also got a change he can throw in there at a 74. I think this is a player who can develop that curve and that change and make it better than what it is. I mean, if he could go back down, work on his cutter to add some velo to it and come back up and still perform at the MLB level, I think a full offseason preparing to be in the MLB, being in the rotation, I think it's going to be great for him, and this is the year Taj Bradley breaks out. I will be trying to acquire him as much as I can. I think I have him in one of our 2 dynasty leagues. I don't know if I have him in both though.
So we're going to differ here. I am going to choose Brandon Pfaadt. I think both options are interesting in their own right. You look at Taj Bradley, he has the best pitch of the two. And we talked about fastball, right? Like Taj has got it. My concern is that everything else he has is either average or below average. Now, I agree with you. I think development can come, and I think he will be a fantastic test for the comments you made earlier in regards to how you're starting to evaluate pitchers and what you're looking for, being the fastball one and then allowing development to come. Having 5 total pitches or having 4 total pitches as it currently stands is a huge benefit to him, but he's going to have to develop at least 2 of those pitches so that he can continue the strikeout numbers that he had in 2023. And the ERA, we saw fluctuation. We saw fluctuation in his consistency last year. 2024 is going to be a really big year. And I'm also very curious for 2024 and Taj Bradley if he can cement himself within this rotation throughout the entirety of the season. When you look at his overall numbers from last year, just in the major leagues, 104 total innings pitched. It's a good amount. I think we could, expectations looking at him for 2024, seeing 140, 150, because overall he had 23 games at the major league level, but he also had 10 games at AAA. So combining both of those innings, he was already at over 140. I'll change it to 160, 170. That's a guy that you can lock into a rotation spot. And in my opinion, has a year ahead of Brandon Pfaadt in overall development. Pfaadt's numbers in 2023, 96 total innings, but a lot of that was also volatile until we hit the postseason. But I'm choosing Fott just because I enjoy the fact that he was given the chance in the postseason to be the guy, to continue the team's success within playoff series and allowing himself to, change his overall mechanics. Moving around on the rubber, I think, was the big indicator in a lot of talk why he had success in the postseason. But for me, Brandon Fott organizationally will be given the chance to be the future ace once Gallen leaves. And I think Bradley is going to continue to have issues because the Rays, they just like analytics too much. But I don't think there's a wrong answer here.
No, I do like Brandon Fott to clarify. I just like Taj Bradley a little bit more. I just wanted to throw out some numbers. You did a great job recapping, but Brandon Fott has that above average slider, comes in at 118 stuff plus. a below average fast and sinker at 97 each. He's got a curveball that comes in at 106 and a change at 90. So he's got a good repertoire, two above average pitches. Both are off speed. I think honestly it comes down to the new philosophy of I want a pitcher who's got that great fastball and then work on the secondaries after. And that's the deciding factor. The only thing I'll say on Brian Bello is yet to be seen, but there's some talk that he worked on improving his slider with the famous Pedro Martinez in the offseason. So I'll be watching spring training to see what that looks like and if there's any data on what that looks like compared to the other sliders across the league.
Yeah, I feel bad for Bello because he was the one obviously that didn't get any run time in this conversation. I love Brian Bello, but again, he falls in line with this the higher floor. Doesn't really give me too much excitement for an explosive breakout, a guy that can enter into the top 10 category. I think Bradley and Brandon Fott have the ability to be aces. I think Bello has the ability to be a really, really nice major league number two. And those, again, they have value. And they talk over 5 years here. You could draft Bradley or you could draft Brandon Fott, and they could end up being relievers. Where I think Bello is guaranteed to be a starter over the next 5 years, barring injury. But again, I'm looking for the higher ceiling players. Now, I do think again it comes into roster construction, but excuse me, that brings us into our next and final tier. Bello being safer. These next three names have a lot of volatility with them. And I'm looking for just a 2024 rostered answer here from you, Richie. Coming in at 96 is Mackenzie Gore. Coming in at 103 is Ricky Tiedemann. And coming in at 121 is Jordan Wicks. Again, three very different profiles. If you could pick one for 2024, who are you rostering?
Well, I guess you could guess this based on our prior conversation in this podcast. And I'm going with Mackenzie Gore. He's got the fastball. His secondaries aren't the greatest, and his control's not the greatest, but all he needs is to have one of those click for him to instantly jump up the boards. Ricky Tiedemann, you already know my concerns with him. We just talked about it earlier with his injury concerns. I think he has the great stuff. Just how long will that sustain? Jordan Wicks, I think, is more of a control guy, doesn't have as much of the pedigree as far as the stuff goes compared to the other two. So I think Mackenzie Gore and Ricky Tiedemann on stuff alone make Jordan Wicks fall lower. And I would almost argue he is in a different tier lower than these two. But I think I'm going Mackenzie Gore. Yeah, I like him a lot, as I know you do too. So I'm curious if you're going Tiedemann or Gore or Jordan Wicks.
Yeah, no, we're in agreement here. Wicks is in this conversation because I think he has a safer floor. We've talked about the Bellows. We've talked about a number of other players today, the Tanner Bibees, that provide that floor for you. I think Wicks's career is going to ultimately shape up to be a fringe top 40 pitcher, a fringe top 40 starter, but a guy that always sits around there. Where I will continue to believe in Mackenzie Gore is being a guy that can have a season where he provides top 10 SP fantasy upside because he has the ability to accumulate those strikeouts. Consistency has been an issue. Health has been an issue up until the last couple of years. But I've seen games for Mackenzie Gore that absolutely show the ability for him to be dominant. Now, Ricky Tiedemann's a great name, but we haven't seen it at the major league level yet. And Tiedemann could very well fall into Mackenzie Gore like arc line here, but the health is a concern. I'm choosing Mackenzie Gore. It's not really close. I think, secondly, I am actually choosing Wicks for the 2024 season just because of the health concerns I have with Tiedemann. So Tiedemann falls to 3, and I would argue undraftable for me in redraft leagues just because Wicks is not even close to the arm ability that Tiedemann has. And it's just gotten to the point where I'm so concerned with this recent news of inflammation.
My only concern with Wicks is the Cubs might not be done spending. They might go and get
Mhm.
Jordan Montgomery. They might go and get Blake Snell. Hell, they might even go and get both of them because they didn't do much besides Imanaga and Bellinger. So that could ruin the chance for Jordan Wicks being in the rotation. But yeah, other than that, I agree with what you were saying. And while you were talking, I was able to toy around with the Fangraphs Stuff Plus, and I was able to select the fastballs Stuff Plus if you were only a starting pitcher and I used 20 innings as a threshold, and it doesn't change too much, but we did get some interesting names. Jacob DeGrom has the best fastball at 155 compared to Strider, who had a 141. So it's just crazy. Our new number three is Mason Miller at 135. Taj drops down to number four. Then behind him is Drew Rasmussen with a 131. Then we had Bobby Miller and Tyler Glasnow, like I spoke before. And then number eight is Yuri Perez with a 128 fastball. So he didn't make the cut last time I had these filters because he only had 91 and one thirds
Yep.
innings pitched. So honestly, maybe this is a good time to talk about Yuri because he was on my list of breakouts that I would have tiered in the Bobby Miller and Grayson Rodriguez. And we look at his stuff. Plus, I just mentioned a 128 fastball, slider 101, curveball 91, and a change 86. So he's got two above average pitches, but does come with the pedigree. I still think I'm taking Bobby Miller and Grayson Rodriguez over Yuri Perez just because of the innings concerns. And Bobby Miller just has phenomenal stuff. But I do think Yuri Perez is breaking out this year.
That leads us to my last question of the day before we wrap up. Are there any players that we did not talk about in regards to breakouts that you would like to highlight next week and give us a little bit of a preview on, or are we good
Mm.
as a collective to move on to sleepers?
Sleepers for next week, you're saying?
Oh, no, I'm more
Uh,
asking, do you have more breakouts? Would you like to construct a list for the listener going into next week, or do you feel as though we touched on
I think we
a
covered
majority of
all
the
of
names?
them, right? Oh, we
Okay.
well, are we taking the age thing out of this?
Yes, we are
Yeah.
taking the
Okay.
age thing
Then
out.
yeah, we'll save them for sleepers then.
Okay.
But yeah, no, we hit on all the
Foreshadowing Nick Pavetta.
yes, Nick Pavetta and Eric
Yeah.
Fetty. But yep, that's all of them. I'm going through the list
Okay.
now, and I don't
Good.
see any that are sticking out unless you wanted to talk about Cutter Crawford. I know he's a guy you
No, I
like.
mean, I went down on these lists and I basically jotted down anyone that was notable, and we obviously shared and cross-referenced. There's of course value at the end of any rankings list. I think at the end of the day, we will probably dive into those small tiers that we have as we get very very close to the major league season, because I think the reality is a lot of those guys will be on waiver wires, and those guys will be the ones that I think you should queue up right off the bat, so that as the season starts and you incur injuries, you can start picking those guys up. But at least for redrafts, I don't expect anybody to be out there drafting Cutter Crawford or a couple of the other names that we mentioned. But all right, that wraps us for today. Thank you, as always, for joining us. We will be breaking down our list of sleepers next week, and as we get a little bit closer to opening day, we will have our news and notes. And I'm sure as the weeks continue to pile up, we will have a plethora of rising injuries. Hopefully, we have some signings next week and a little bit more clarity as a couple of these organizations try and figure out who will be starting. But again, thank you. We will catch you next week.